Love Overboard, Part 3. Lewis's cab to the airport arrived concurrently with a call from the cruise ship office. The chief regretfully informed him that they had recovered Antonio's body, his wife's body, and their baggage. He compassionately communicated the procedure to identify and claim their possessions. Lewis was puzzled and thought for a moment. He replied that Antonio wasn't married. The chief rechecked his information and said that his ship's boarding registration said otherwise. He paused for a second and summed it up to Antonio's adventurous lifestyle. He figured that Antonio and his date had initiated some sort of role play to escalate their weekend. The chief also suggests that he bring someone with him for moral support. Lewis was an ex-war veteran and knew exactly what he meant by that. He generated up enough strength that was needed to carry out the commitment that he made to Antonio's mother. He pulled up to the temporary claim area that was congested with grieving loved ones. Lewis identified himself at the front office. The director led him to a collection of luggage belonging to Antonio. The husky smell of their luggage brought the ocean scent boldly inside the storage room. Lewis had stopped for a moment and paused on one bag in particular. It was a dainty purple overnight bag that resembled the one that his wife often used. He scratched his bald head and thought for a second. Even when the obvious stared him in the face, Lewis still couldn't connect the dots that linked his wife with his best friend Antonio. His light bulb finally lit up to his maximum wattage and bent him over as if someone had sucker punched him in the gut. The thought of his wife having an affair made him sick beyond belief. He needed some fresh air as his throat dried up like a raisin and blood rapidly departed from his head. He wished that he had followed the chief's earlier instructions about moral support. He couldn't fathom that Antonio had committed the ultimate sin between best friends, betrayal. His stomach agitated aggressively when he applied that same scenario to his wife. But at the same time, he felt bad to think that about the only two people in the world that he truly loved. His head was loaded with crazy thoughts and his conduct became aggressive. He insistently asked the directors where their bodies was being held. Lewis needed to see their bodies and he needed to see them now. He had to put a visual conclusion on all his thoughts no matter what traumatic impressions it might leave. Lewis got inside his car and traveled a short distance as directed. He was met and welcomed inside by another director who was aware of his antagonistic disposition. Lewis acknowledged the weirdness in the second director, but refused to entangle himself in anything outside his quest for answers. He stated the names of the two people that he wanted to identify, and the director nervously smirked as they started to walk. They walked down a long, bright white corridor, and Lewis felt an eerie sensation in his body. They made a left turn and walked endlessly down another hall. At this point, Lewis's patience was running out of patience. They finally stopped at the end of the hall, and Lewis knew that they had arrived. He felt the presence of his wife's spirits before they entered the cold refrigerated room. The smirky-faced director opened the door and they slowly walked inside. He followed the director as they moved closer to the only two capsules at the end of the row. Lewis had a strong body built, but his knees was ready to collapse. The director opened the two capsules side by side. Sweat instantly appeared upon his head inside the icy cold room. The director looked at Lewis and pulled back the first sheet. He gasped while clenching his airtight fists. He distressfully rocked his head from side to side while confirming the identity of his friend Antonio. The director recovered his remains and they both approached the second capsule. He slowly pulled back the second sheet and Lewis' jaw dropped and he instantly jerked his head away after recognizing his wife. The tears built up inside his eyes and Lewis's watery embankment was full to capacity. His embankment broke and tears rolled down the face of a proud veteran. His stomach knotted up as if a baker had twisted his body into the biggest pretzel on display. He tried to stand tall, but the knots reduced his height by several feet. His disappointment in his wife reduced to sorrow and then flared to anger, and the cycle repeated back to disappointment. The director asked Lewis, was that Antonio's wife? His smirk drove Lewis crazy, and he just wanted 5 minutes to correct it. But Lewis kept his cool up under enormous pressure that hammered him from all directions. He felt as if he was abandoned on an isolated island and longed for the two people that identified his existence. Lewis exhaustedly wanted to crawl into an empty capsule and permanently seal it from the inside. The director repeatedly asked Lewis, was that Antonio's wife? With tears still rolling down his face, he boldly stated, no, that's not Antonio's wife, she was mine. The director strangely had no reaction to Lewis' discovery and was about to recover her body. But Lewis stopped him and focused on her hands that was gracefully across her chest. He noticed that she had on a different wedding ring. It wasn't a big expensive 2-carat marquise diamond ring that he slaved hours of overtime to purchase, but a cheaper cubic zirconia ring that had turned colors from being exposed to the ocean salt water. He paused again in thought while scratching his head. He then reached over and aggressively snatched the cover off Antonio, revealing his chest. The answer stared Lewis right in the face. Antonio had on the exact match ring. Lewis' anger had peaked several times throughout the last month, and he was clearly out of gas. He simply continued to process the paperwork with a dead man walking expression on his face. He couldn't wait to get home and pop the cap of ice cold beer. He got home and finished off the case of beer that he started a few days ago. Lewis woke up the next day and felt the same hurt that he felt the day before. He went through Lisa's, his wife's bag, and discovered that she had placed the wedding ring inside. He also noticed that she had several pairs of lingerie that he did recognize. Antonio had purchased the lingerie at the mall not too far from his house. Lewis just didn't know that Antonio purchased them for his wife. Lewis placed her bag down and walked in circles, trying not to flare up. Too late. Round 2 was kicked off at 9 o'clock that morning. He knew deeply how she had loved her ring and that it would take an act of Congress to separate the two. For her to nonchalantly take it off spoke volumes. Lisa was in love with Antonio. Thank you for listening to Love Overboard Part 3. Part 4, the grand finale. Lewis's questions get answered. You don't want to miss that one. Please like and subscribe to my channel. But in the meantime and in between time, stay in peace, show some love, and give a hug. God bless and be safe.